Hello and welcome once again to episode 141 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri, and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
And special super completionist Ben is joining us.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
Thanks. So before we get into anything particular, we have Swift evolution updates as usual. Swift is constantly evolving, and I think that's a good thing for the most part. First on our list are three proposals that did get accepted. So that is the init accessors, which allow you to provide initializers within the property wrapper that get called upon initialization. So that's pretty cool. We have actor isolation interference with property wrappers, so you can now do better things in property wrappers without actors yelling at you. And we have generalized conformance macros as extension macros, which just makes macros a little bit more extensive in general now that people have had a chance to use them.
Yep. Those were all proposals that we've talked about before. These have just all been accepted, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm just zooming through them.
Cool.
There is one minor one that had an update, and that is that arbitrary macro names in the global scope are, I think, no longer allowed because that just caused the type checker to have a panic attack every single time. So that just simplifies things on the compiler team side. But you can still do them in non-global scope. So it's just a new restriction that now that everyone has had a chance to use them, everyone realized this is probably not a great time for this. I think another example of that is the count where, which was a proposed property on collections where you can get the count where and then you pass in a predicate. And that was accepted years ago. But turns out the compiler was not too ready for it because it conflicted with just count and then just had an aneurysm every single time you try to use one or the other. So it was immediately shelved, and it's being re-brought up now. So that way, hey, maybe now's a good chance now that the compiler has been rewritten a few times to reconsider something like that. So always cool to see those proposals kind of make their way in and out. And it's just a general reminder, anyone can go ahead and go to the Swift forums and pitch a change. Count where is just a property. Anyone could write that. It's just Swift code. It's just, should we include it in the standard library? Yes or no? And it seems like yes, that's in general a good idea. And maybe then was not a good time, but now it's. And if you have a similar property that you think generally is something really good to have, then go ahead and pitch it. So on to more exciting things. Ben, I think you've been hard at work over the past 7 years making an app, and it's finally come out. Can you tell us more?
Sure. So I don't know if it's been 7, but it's been quite a while, way longer than I should have taken to build it. But for the first time since 2014, I am officially an indie app developer again. That was the last time I had an app in the App Store that was not connected to my my main job.
9.
I think that's 7 years.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I've been kind of independently in the App Store, and it's really kind of cool and exciting to be back, in the indie club. The app's called Solarc, and it's basically it's essentially a weather application, but it also has the idea around it that you might want to, for one thing, track a whole bunch of locations at the same time. Let's say you have friends and family that don't live near you, colleagues, things like that. And you want to understand not just maybe, whether it's raining there or not, but also sort of what time of day it is. Is it a good time to call someone? That kind of thing. Keep an eye on things like alerts. Should there be a strong storm or something that comes through there? I want to know that. So Solarc was designed basically to help with that. And it's something that I sort of was involved in a Twitter conversation with a whole bunch of people about it. In 2020, shortly after the pandemic started, and worked on it a bit. And it was focused only around really just sort of the time of day and things like that, solar information, essentially. And then and I worked on it for a while, and then I couldn't really sort of figure out an easy way to monetize it that would make sense, that I thought would make sense. So and then also just stuff got in the way, and COVID and all that stuff. So got shelved for a bit, and then worked on it. If I look at my commit history, actually, I worked on it in 2020, in 2021, and in 2022. So I did spend time on it all 3 of those years. But the major sort of effort to get it finished was done in May and June of this year. So I picked back up and really wanted to get it done and get it out there. And I incorporated weather data as well, largely because Apple, several years ago bought Dark Sky and then turned it into WeatherKit, and so it really simplified the process of integrating weather into your app, because it's just a framework that's built into iOS now. And it's a pretty generous free tier. You get 500,000 calls a month before you have to pay Apple. So also pretty easy from a monetization strategy of expense, at least, right? It's gonna be a while before I probably hit that cap. So worked on it really diligently over the last couple of months, and finally got it out. I want to say it went live either last week or the week before. It's been out for I think a week and a week and a half. I've been in a beta for a while, so I'm trying to remember which of those milestones that I remember was it the beta or was that the release? But it's only been out for a bit, but well received so far. Few good ratings on the App Store already, and hopefully just going to continue to grow it. I did start up some Apple search ads, so first time
nice.
that I've done that as an independent developer as well. They didn't exist when I did this last 10 years ago. So lots of new things to learn about kind of how to market and promote the app, which it's fun. It's been fun to kind of learn more about how do you go about that in 2023 versus a long time ago. So it's been fun, and I'm excited about the 1.0. I already have a bunch of ideas, including some ideas that you guys as beta testers have put into my backlog.
We were harsh.
Yeah, harsh but fair. You guys had a lot of really good. All the beta testers had really good feedback, and I've got a nice little collection of improvements and things and new feature ideas in my backlog. Something else that I did that I really liked was I tried to be a little bit more formal, even though it's just me, about kind of tracking the work and being diligent about that. So I use an app called Linear, which is despite being what is probably an Electron app. It's a Mac app, but it's really a web application.
It's gotten less garbagey over time. I can say that.
It's probably the best web app that I've ever used on my Mac. And even whether you do it in that interface or you just are straight up in your browser, they have been very thoughtful about their design. Their design is very keyboard shortcut centric, so it makes it really quick and easy to use. It's pretty intuitive. It's got a lot of cool automation features around moving tickets around automatically and stuff. So again, even though it's just me, it's probably a little bit of overkill, but I really enjoyed kind of it's been very motivating to kind of keep track of that stuff and also see all the work that I did. I mean, I started tracking getting it out to 1.0, I think sometime in either it was late April, early May is when I kind of really got into it. And just that part from that to release, not including the other work that I did in previous years, it was 100 points, story points worth of work that I completed in 2 months. So that was really cool. That even if as a tip, even if you're just one person working on stuff, not saying you need to go crazy overkill on these things, but actually having a way to kind of track what you're doing next, and maybe most importantly, see what you've already done. It can actually be really motivating to help you go I completed 60 points worth of work. I got 40 more to go, or whatever it might be. And it really can help you, I think, to maybe get motivated and stay motivated in a way that I've struggled to do as a single person shop for a while. So that was a technique that I picked up that I can recommend. So
yeah, I think that's especially important when you're doing this on the side, not your main focus of time during the week, because it's so easy to feel like you got nothing done. And you are making so little progress that you might as well just I'll skip today. And then just continue not making progress. So having some sort of system whether it's like counting your tickets or writing a PR for every single thing you do,
Right.
or like developing open and letting
Yeah.
other people know. Like any one of
Right.
those techniques can be a huge motivating factor because it helps you keep track of all the hard work that you've been doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, for sure. And what I found that has worked for me is with linear, there's this idea of it's not a thing that's unique to linear, but there's this idea of cycles, kind of rather than basically like a sprint, right? Just sort of an amount of time that you block off, and then you put work in it, and you try and complete that work in the time that you have, right? It's a fairly universal concept in programming. But what's cool about linear is that it sets it up and runs it for you, so you don't have to kind of the logistics of like, oh, I got to make a thing, a bucket, and put a bunch of things in it, and then make sure that that bucket is properly time blocked. And then when it's over, I have to deal with it and move things. Basically, what happens is you set up a couple little settings inside Linear and say, I want my cycles to be this long, and I want you to automatically create maybe one or two in the future that I can kind of use as a place to put future things. I want you to automatically move tickets from when we're done that weren't finished to the next one. So and then, of course, all the statistics about it are also tracked completely automatically. So again, whether it's linear or something else, I found that kind of stuff to be really helpful because I set mine to be a week long because it's just me. I don't need it to be super complicated. And it's just the 7 days, including Monday through Sunday. And what's really cool is so instead of people might have heard of a burn down chart before, particularly in Agile, where you start with amount of work, let's say a number of stories or tickets or whatever, and as you complete them, the chart goes down to zero. And ideally, what you want is to get to zero when you're done. That would be a perfect cycle. Doesn't usually happen that way, but that would be the ideal. For whatever reason, Linear decided to do a burn up chart instead. So you actually kind of have like a goal line in the graph, and you start at the bottom. And as you work on things, the line kind of
Catches
snakes
up
its
with
way
it.
up, yeah, up to the top. And they do two things. They give you basically the goal line, which is the number of stories or the amount of points that you have in your cycle. They give you a line that shows you the stuff that you've started, and then another line that shows you the stuff that you've finished. So it kind of gives you like three ways to look at your progress. And again, I found that very motivating to like, oh look, I'm halfway through the week, and I'm about halfway through the amount of work that I said that I was going to do, or oh, I'm falling a little bit behind, or oh, I'm actually ahead, or whatever. Again, it's not a big thing, but I found it to be really valuable to see that. And then what you can also do is they give you kind of a history, so you can go out to this what they call the cycles view. It shows you all the ones that you've done so far, and the current one, and like the one or two that are in the future. And they give you little stats on like, you did 83% of the work that you put in the cycle you completed during that time. And you can see that kind of go up and down over time. And it's nerdy data stuff, but I found it to be, for whatever reason, it works for me. It may not work for anybody else, but as a tip, I've like you said, right, it can be hard to motivate yourself when you're just one person. And this is a process that has worked well for me, and I basically plan to continue to do it because I found it to be kind of a winning strategy. But anything you do to kind of, if you like checking things off, or maybe you don't like doing that, or you got to kind of figure out where your motivation can be found, and then if you can find something that helps you support that, ideally maybe with a little bit of automation, so it's not like annoying to manage. I've used other systems before, again, by myself, and in particular, it's bad when you're by yourself because you kind of feel like if you have to do a lot of maintenance of this thing that you're using, it's like I'm kind of performing all this work just for me,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of I'm performing it to no one. And so I think that was part of what I struggled with when I've used other things before. And this being, it's not obviously completely automated, but having some automations built in to kind of help move things along for me just automatically. I was like, oh, okay. So now I feel like I'm leveraging this now rather than just sort
Mm-hmm.
of me like dumping a bunch of data into something on the work that I'm doing and then having to do a bunch of things to make it useful to me. I put in a little bit, I create tickets, and I just basically change statuses. And for the most part, the rest of it just does it for me. And it's like, oh, now I feel like I'm kind of leveraging the tool and getting something out of it. And I found it to be obviously a lot more effective because I went 3 years without shipping this thing, and in a matter of like 2 months, I got organized and managed to get the 1.0 out. So, you know, I guess I would call that a win.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's. I mean, I've used things like even Trello for
Sure.
my own personal projects in the past.
Yeah.
And it's good, but yeah, it is a lot more manual. You have to change the status and move it over manually and stuff. So this seems like a better middle, not even really like a middle ground. It's like you kind of get the best of both worlds without
Yeah.
all of that work that comes from kind of being in the middle, I suppose.
Right. And Trello is
Yeah.
very flexible, right? But that's
Yeah.
kind of like a strength and a weakness, sort of, because you're like, oh, it's great. You can kind of you can plan anything in Trello, which is true. But then, to me, it kind of feels. I used it a bunch, but it kind of feels like eventually you're like, well, now I'm just kind of
That's like
moving
the
things
down.
around. Like, what am I getting out of it, right?
That's the downfall of Jira too, right? You can
Yes,
customize it so
exactly.
much that it becomes this behemoth that you have to wrangle
Right.
at every moment.
Right.
And it's almost better to have something that's opinionated, that has a
Yes.
methodology built in, that
Yes.
you're not fighting. Like you're just going along with
Right.
that methodology, and it can help gamify the whole process, right?
Sure.
Turn it into something that
Yeah.
you're not putting a huge amount of maintenance into, but you can like get that little dopamine rush when you check things off and
Right.
feel
Yeah.
like you're doing good progress, because most of development is like banging your head against the wall, and it's
Yes.
not necessarily like when it's smooth sailing you feel like a genius, and when it's
Yes.
not you just feel like you shouldn't exist and you go
Right.
all the way down.
Right.
So having some little thing to make you feel like, even though this partly only 80% ish good, and I
Right.
hate it, I can at least check that thing off and feel good again about
Yeah.
making that little inch of progress. So
Yeah. And
I
I
think
put things in
those
there
little
like
wins are
uploading.
important.
Yeah, I did things like putting tickets in there that were basically like zero weight, right? To say I submitted the build to App Store Connect that
Oh
is
yeah.
for like the final build for submission, right? Like that was a task that I put in there, which silly and it's going to take me 2 seconds, but
It's a
it
reminder.
yeah, it's a reminder, and it's like, and then it was really fun to go click done, like I did that, right? And
Yeah.
then I had one that was ensure all metadata was accurate on the listing for the App Store so that I could then say submit for review. And
Mhm.
again, it was like, okay, I've reviewed it all. I'm going to check that off and I'm going to hit the submit for review button. And I had this like very satisfying sort of completion of the work, which was, it was really fun. I've been a long time since I've hit the submit for review button for anything that is just mine. And it was really cool to do that. So.
Not to mention, you probably get to add that ticket in 3 times because of all the
Yeah.
various app review shenanigans.
I actually did have to submit 3 times. So you're right. You were exactly right. Yeah,
it's always 3 with subscriptions, I think.
Yeah. What's really interesting is while I was disappointed. Of course, I was not surprised at all, but I was disappointed. And it was 2 things that they dinged me for. They now, so this is, and been hearing this from other devs too, that like now they want you to have your privacy policy
In
and
terms of
your
service.
terms of service or your EULA inside the description,
Mm-hmm.
which is, those are not clickable links.
Yep.
So I don't know how a user is ever going to use those at all.
Yep.
Plus,
Weird.
a little while ago, they added a privacy policy like section in the submission
Mm-hmm.
metadata that has a
Mhm.
link that is that
No,
they
you need one in the
expose as a
thing.
real link, but you still need it in the description, which makes no
Mhm.
sense. And then they were telling me the other 2 things. I don't think I got the "we can't find your subscription" thing, which is like a classic. We
Yeah.
spent 3 seconds looking at your app and we couldn't find your subscription, so we're going to reject you. I didn't get that, fortunately, but I did get we cannot. So this one was infuriating. We cannot add a city. So the way Solarc works is it starts out with it's empty, right? Because I don't know what cities you want. So you click on the plus button and you have 2 options. You can either add your current location, which is a floating, it uses core location to go fetch your current location, display data, or you can pick any city in the world that you want and it will then do that. And you just type in the city name. So pretty, I think, straightforward. Like I didn't get any major complaints from any of the beta testers during the process. Like I can't add cities, right? And
Yeah.
I got a rejection saying basically we were unable to. It was like core functionality was the rejection or something like that. We cannot figure out how to add a city, or we cannot do it. And they're like, please see attached screenshot. So I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, did you not find the plus button? Did you not like find the search bar? Like, I don't know. So I look at the screenshot, and of course, I'm pretty sure it was like my app is not yet designed for iPad, so it
It's
runs only
taken on an
on
iPad. They
iPhone.
do all
It's taken
testing
on
on
an
an
iPad,
iPad.
right? So it's the little mini iPhone screen on a giant iPad. And then they were showing the search box, and there was no results. But when I looked in the upper right corner of the status bar, I saw that it said SOS on it, which, unless I'm
Oh my
mistaken,
gosh.
is no cellular service, which would make sense if it was
Mhm.
just an iPad in an office. But I
Yeah.
believe that also means no Wi-Fi. Like they have no network connectivity at all, right? So then I was like,
Also, a very
well,
old rejection. Like I can tell, I've been rejected for both of the things you mentioned
really?
before, years
Wow.
ago, many years ago. Ever since subscriptions were a thing, you had to have the terms of service in the thing. And
Yeah.
ever since apps were a thing, you had to have a screen that shows when you're not connected to the internet. And it's just like a part of this ever growing list of concerns that you need to have in the back of your mind writing an app for the App Store. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit unfair, but some of it is fair. Like a user might be dumb enough to not have
That's
a
true.
network connection, right?
That's true.
You just don't expect
Yeah.
that to be the default testing mode.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, for
So to
real.
be fair, I did not have anything specific in my app that like alerts you to the fact that you have no internet connection at all. So in light of their rejection, I went in and I basically added during the search process, and also when it goes to update the weather data. If there's no internet connection at all, it now shows you a toast message that tells you, "Hey, there's no internet. Please connect to the internet and try again." Like there's nothing I can do
Yeah.
about it, but like at
Yeah.
least you know that that's what's wrong, right? And then specifically, it tells you that instead of showing you no results, which is what it was doing before, because it was assuming. And the thing is, I'm not even doing a regular network request. I'm actually using the reverse geocoding built into core location or map kit. So the network request itself is actually being handled by Apple, like not even by me through the frameworks. But anyway, I resolved it. I got rejected again for the same reason, and this time I said, well, now it's giving you alerts that you're not connected to the internet, so I can't fix your internet problem, but I can tell you that like it should be telling you at a minimum, if you don't have internet, that you're not going to get a result. And then what's funny is when I kind of like very starkly pointed out that
Then it's
you
accepted.
need an internet connection, they immediately accepted it for that. And then I had
Nice.
it was like one more, it was like the third rejection. I had one more IAP related nonsense that I resolved, and then they approved me. And what's funny is it seemed pretty clear that they as soon as they find a rejection, they basically stop, and
Yeah.
they don't go any further. So the problem is you'll fix it, and then if they find some other reason to reject you, they'll just give you that, and so then you get this like dribbled out collection of reasons that are why the app won't be submitted or won't be accepted. You have to work them one at a time.
For a service we pay for, because we do pay $99 a year for
That's
this.
true.
Which is not super expensive, but not trivial either.
Sure.
Yeah.
You would expect some basic amount of like professional discussion regarding this.
Sure.
For instance, the not having internet connection is not a deal breaker of your app functioning, right? But it is something you might legitimately want to know. Like you did not think about the scenario where most people like always have an instant internet connection. It's like the app is not going to work. They could have just told you, hey, we're not going to immediately put this on sale, but we wanted to flag with you, hey, you don't have this functionality. We realize your app does work in the majority of the situation. We'll leave it up to you to fix, or just click the button if you don't care. Like that would have been an excellent response to that particular problem.
But they didn't even the mediocre version of that. They didn't even do, because the rejection was not your app doesn't work when there's no internet. It was, we could not add a city. Here's a screenshot. They never actually volunteered in the description.
Oh,
no,
yeah, exactly.
They didn't tell me that the reason that they didn't tell me that they didn't have internet, right? I had to sort of infer that from their screenshot. And I probably, had I not noticed or had it not been as obvious, I would have just been like, what are you talking about? For one thing, I'm using an Apple service. So if you're not able to get location data returned to you, that's actually, there's nothing I can do about that. I mean, it's where are you? Why don't you have the ability to talk to Apple servers and get the location data? But in this case, it'd have to be no internet. But it was just, it's very clear that the process is What's funny is it almost feels like a no human automated process. Like it almost kind of has that vibe of like we ran it through some thing and it like spit out some random crap at us and
It's a rushed
that's
human
wrong,
process.
right? Yeah, it's a very rushed human process, which I kind of feel like I really would rather go to either side. Like go to do what Google does, where it's just basically a bunch of checks for private APIs and spyware and other automated things that they do, and that's it. And otherwise, you're good. Or I'd rather go to more of like what they claim it is, which is a
Yeah.
we carefully curate all the stuff. Because I mean, how many times do they say that, and then the next day it comes out, oh, an app got pulled from the App Store that was like at the top of the charts because it was literally scamming people out of what $20 a week on some silly subscription that was not legitimate. It's like you kind of can't have it both ways. Like either it
They
is
had a
heavily
screen that
curated
said they were
thing.
offline. Like, I don't know what you're...
That's all they need.
I mean, honestly, I don't think any of the reviewers really check the internet connectivity of your app unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
Because so many developers have like scammed the system where they check, oh, is Apple connecting right now? We're going to show something special and not, right?
Yeah.
That has been done ad nauseum, mostly because Apple uses their like own private IP block. Like how they can circumvent this, just go on cellular. And no one would know. Or like do a review 1 week later to like catch any fishy behavior. Like there's so many things that Apple could be doing to protect users, which is why it's so funny every single time that they like bring up that reasoning. Because for all intents and purposes, and I've been vocal about this, I support the fact that we have app review. I think it's a good thing to have. Yes. However, it is so poorly implemented and so neglected in terms of a service that it could actually be for the developer submitting and for users like respecting that protection that they're getting, that it might as well not exist at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, it's very, very similar to like the TSA at airports in the United States, right? Like it's this thing that has this goal. They don't really do a very good job of actually achieving that goal, and the people who have to interface with it are like inconvenienced and annoyed every single time they interact with it. And it's like that's exactly what app review is.
No one feels safe
not really,
because
it's not protecting It's not protecting the users in a real way because scam apps, very prominent ones, get to the top of the charts frequently. The users of it, us, right, the developers, are constantly inconvenienced and annoyed by all the silly rules that aren't written down and don't really make a lot of sense and whatever. But you just have to do them anyway because it's David versus Goliath. And then what we end up with is something where despite what they say, lots of stuff gets through that just shouldn't be on the store. And then probably also lots of stuff that maybe should be on the store isn't, because either they submit and eventually give up because like it's not worth it, or devs don't even make the app in the first place because they think I don't know if I can get this through app review, so I'm not going to bother. Right? Like it's the ambiguity of it just makes it so that just we end up with worse apps kind of overall, I think, because it's so unclear.
And it cheapens the product at the end of the day.
It really does seem like a luck of the draw situation where maybe you do get a good reviewer and they're good at their job and they have Wi-Fi enabled, and you can actually test the app, or it's just someone that wants to fly through apps or whatever.
I mean, I don't think that exists. You get lucky and you get a reviewer that didn't care enough to reject you. That's what being lucky is.
Fair, sure.
They spent so little time that I was like, it looks fine to me, moving on. They didn't check to see if your thing worked. Like, I don't think that exists. But like going back to like the terms of service, they could fix this, right? They have the tooling, especially now with SolarC getting UIs like pre-built that do all the right things, that I'm sure someone is going to be rejected for. It's going to be the 100%. Funniest thing ever to see that. It's like, oh, my screen got rejected. Guess who made the screen? Apple. So like that is going to absolutely be a thing, and I'm going to be here for it because it's going to be hilarious. However, like at the end, do you remember end user license agreements?
Yeah.
We don't think about end user license agreements because do you know what Apple did when they launched the App Store? They said, hey, we realize most developers don't want to think about end user license agreements. And therefore, here is one that we, Apple, provide that should cover the majority of cases. And if you are a special developer and you want a special one, you can upload a special one. but
Right.
you don't have to. They could do
Right.
that for A, terms of service, and B, privacy policies that would cover the vast majority of cases.
Yeah.
Right.
And for anyone else who doesn't like have that or like needs to collect data because they use Firebase or whatever, they can
Right.
go ahead and supply their own. But for the vast
Right.
majority of cases, they can make it simple. If you use that screen, they could detect that during the automated part of app
Mhm.
review and give you the little blurb in your description.
Mhm.
Like, or
Yep.
even as a nice thing under the description that every user now has to see. Like,
Right.
there are
Or make
so
it
many.
clickable so that they actually work. Because like in the
Yeah.
text, it doesn't do anybody any.
Yeah, for real.
Is someone gonna transcribe the raw URL that they see with their eyeballs into their browser to then go
No.
look? Of course not. Like no one's gonna do that.
No, you
I
take
don't
a
think you
screenshot
could.
and then you tap on it.
Well,
That,
yeah.
ironically
so
enough,
there's-
works.
That's true. But what's funny too is that I don't even have a term. I don't have terms of service because there's like I'm not doing. I'm no location data ever leaves the app. I don't sign any of that up. The only thing that I do. So I have analytics. I use Telemetry Deck for analytics, which is a nice sort of independently built thing that's not Firebase, that is not scary. And I do like really basic stuff, like I get things like the version number of the operating system, and like I get basic user counts and things like that. So very very simple,
And that's
very
privacy, not terms of
anonymized.
service. On
Right.
top
So
of
it's
it.
that's very very simple stuff. And then so I do have a privacy policy where essentially I wrote one that I essentially went and found like a popular. I think I maybe got the one from. I don't know. So I picked some popular indie app and I was like, let me just steal their privacy policy
Yeah.
and then edit it. Because I mean, it's
It's okay. They
standard
stole
language.
it too.
Yeah, right. So and then what I ended up doing is I deleted like most of it because my privacy policy is like you're going to use the app on your phone. If you give it permission to have the floating location, then you've granted that. You give me the city name that you want, and that data only sits on your phone.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's the end of like. I don't have users. There's no like a login, right? There's no account or anything. So very simple privacy policy. I put it on my website for the app. I link to that in the app in settings. So if you go to privacy policy, it just shows you that web page, right?
Right.
Makes it so that way if I ever update it, it's really easy.
Now you
I
need to
link that
mark it
privacy.
17 plus because you have external web access.
It's true. It's true. So, but then
Be
I link it in
careful.
the privacy policy section of the App Store, and then they wanted me to add it to the description. So I'm like, fine. And then for a terms of service, I don't have one because there just isn't really enough there. I don't even
Yeah.
need one. So, and I use the standard EULA that they give me. So what's crazy is they made me link the EULA in the description, which is their EULA. It's not mine. It's
Yep.
theirs. And it's like, you already know this link. Like, why don't you just standard in the same way you do the privacy policy, just automatically link to it? And then there you go. You've got what you need. That by the way, no one is ever going to look at for even 2 seconds, right? Like no one is going to read that. It's funny the performative nature of some of this stuff like that. We have to have it for legal reasons. It's like, but literally no one is going. I bet you probably no App Store user, probably not none, but like probably a tiny fraction of 1% of the App Store users have ever even looked at the EULA or any of those things, let alone thoroughly read through them.
Well, you did. You copied someone, so you looked at it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then, but one thing that I didn't get dinged on was I'm almost positive I don't have the EULA or the privacy policy linked on the paywall, which is the thing that used to make you do, and I don't have that because it's linked in the inside settings. It's already, if you want it, you can get to it there, or you can get to it through the App Store, or it's on the website, or it's available everywhere. And they didn't ding me on that. I think it's in part because my guess is they probably didn't even look at the paywall. I have 3 ways you can upgrade inside of the app. You get 2 locations for free. If you want more than that, you got to pay. So I have a regular paywall in settings that you can get to. I have a call to action in settings. It's like a little sort of header cell that I put at the top if you haven't paid to get you to upgrade. And you can upgrade immediately right there. It doesn't take you to the paywall first. It just lets you just buy it all right away. And then the third thing is if you're in search and you've already got 2 locations selected, entered, then it says, oh, you can't add any more. Please, if you want to have more locations, and it's the same, it's like a call to action. So my guess is that probably they tested one of those other 2 call to actions and not the paywall, which means they never even looked at the paywall. So they don't,
They're saving it for version 1.1.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll probably get rejected. The next build that I do, I'm probably going to get rejected for the paywall, I bet.
And that's how it works.
Yeah.
So it's very funny knowing what you're going to be rejected for, but like just waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
You don't have to do the work until you get rejected for it, right? So
Yeah, I'm
might
just
as
going to
well
wait,
just
right?
like punt
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
As long as you're cognizant of it. So
Yeah. And I plan moving on with 17. I plan on moving over to the Apple paywall when it's, once I can ship that. Because then hopefully there won't be any reason to reject me for that. Although we know that, right, like you said, it will be pretty funny the first time we see like a 9 to 5 Mac article or something about like developer gets rejected for using Apple's paywall. Um, and I think it's partly because I don't think they train their reviewers to know like what the modern stuff even is
nor
necessarily.
do
So
they
they
have the
don't.
time for it.
Well, right, yeah.
Like it
We
reminds
don't.
me of the not the chat bots, but the chat people that you actually talk to on
Right.
these sites. They're talking about like a dozen people at the same time,
Yeah.
just going
Yeah.
round robin trying to get as many at once, and it's like frankly abusing labor, right?
Yeah.
For perceived customer excellence.
Uh-huh.
So like yeah, app review is not 2 weeks anymore, and that's a good thing. But it's kind of
Yeah.
useless now. Like I don't see
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that Apple needs to like fire all their reviewers. I am saying, however, that I really think Apple needs to very rapidly rethink the system.
Yeah.
Perhaps make non like searchable and non like you have to have an external link to the app. Make that no review or like the
Yeah.
current version of review, which is like the bare
Mm-hmm.
minimum of what basically what TestFlight has, right?
Right.
And then if you want something that's actually published in the Today View and you want all of that, sorry, it's gonna be a hell of a process, but
Right.
you know what you're getting at the end of that.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
you have an actionable list of things and like a
Mm-hmm.
limited amount of times you can waste their time.
Mm-hmm.
And until then, you have a thing you can link to, right? But
Yeah.
at the very least, you know like what you're working towards is potentially getting featured. And if you're like they say, hey, your app looks like shit, we're not going to feature this. It's not going to happen until you make your app look better.
Right.
And if you think
Right.
you're making your app look significantly better but still looks bad, it's still not going to be featured. But at
Right.
least you know
Yeah.
that. It's not like,
Yeah.
I think it looks good. I don't see the problem with it. Like, that doesn't help anyone at the end of the day,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, be terse, be vicious, like, sure. But, like, make that have a good end
Right.
goal. If like
Yeah.
we have all of that anxiety for not even getting it on the app store, it's like what's the
Mm-hmm.
freaking point? Anyways,
Yeah. The rules of the game, they're written down. The problem is, it's not all the rules, right? Like the App Store review guidelines is
Yeah.
extensive, but it's also not all of the rules. I mean, I'm sure we've all been rejected either for personal apps or professional apps before, where you're like, wait, why am I getting rejected for this? What is nice? So yeah, it'd be nice if they just said what all, even if they are kind of overly verbose or maybe a little draconian or whatever, like even if they just had a book that had all the
Yeah.
actual rules that you could get rejected for,
I can make
that
me
would
pull
be an
out the book
improvement.
again.
What's interesting about this whole thing is it's like, okay, here are 3 app developers that have been doing this for varying amounts of time. We all know that the system is broken, and we
Yeah.
all know that the App Store is essentially Apple's cash cow. That's how they make the most money.
Yeah.
Things like, hey, make it so that you can link to the EULA in the description and not have to screenshot it. Like,
That's on Apple. That's not even on us.
Right.
that's my point. It's like for a system that for app developers built by app developers in this app store built by app developers at Apple. That's a lot of app.
And then it's
Nothing's
ostensibly
happened.
for the users, right? Like this is all
Exactly.
in support of trying to make the user experience great. And there's so many ways where it's not, right? That it just seems it shows you the difference between sort of good enough and maybe genuinely excellent, in the sense that if good enough is making you just obscene amounts of money, why would you make it
stop?
excellent? Like, I mean, I think they make their hardware as good as
Sure.
it can be because that is literally a selling point, and it gets them to to sell more hardware. But I think on the App Store, generally speaking, the apps are great, and people obviously are using the App Store a ton and getting all kinds of apps, big and small. And I don't. My guess is that the calculus around let's spend a bunch of money to make this excellent, I guess just it hasn't risen to the point where it's deemed necessary for the next level of business for them in that category. And so they go, well, good enough is good enough, which, I get that. I understand that idea. But on the other hand, we're not talking about even necessarily excellent here. We're just talking about
No, and I think the developer's
some
sentiment
basics.
is that it's not good enough in
Right.
general. I think
Yeah.
most developers are not satisfied with how it is. But
Right.
again, we're the minority, and we're just working for Apple. So
well, and in one sense, we are clearly the revenue generator for that, right? And in another sense, we are also kind of the cost center, right? Because they have to spend hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to develop technologies that then we use to build things. They also have to host all of the apps. If any app that's free, obviously, developers don't pay anything other than the $100 a year for the privilege of doing that, right? There's bandwidth costs, there's all that stuff. They have to pay all the app reviewers. I mean, I'm not defending them. I'm just saying, like, from
totally.
We are both a source of huge amounts of revenue because they take their 30%, but we're also a cost center in many ways. And I feel like it seems like the sentiment inside Apple, and I don't have any little birdies over there that can tell me this, but it seems like the sentiment over there is that the cost center perspective is kind of winning compared to the revenue generation thing. Because when you see things like the Epic lawsuit, and you see the ways that they say what they say in marketing and developer conferences and stuff, and then they say what they really think when they're being deposed, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I think they think that all of the customers that exist on the App Store that use maybe even mostly third-party apps are their customers and are not the customers of the individual developers and companies who built those tools and those apps. And so they feel perfectly entitled to all of that money I think in a very non-ironic way. Like, they just think that, like, yeah, of course this is our money, right? These are our customers. It's like, well, they wouldn't be your customers if it weren't for all of the third-party developers that have built those apps and maintained those apps and take those support calls and manage, the experience for those users. Yes, Apple's involved in that, but the great effort there is on the developer side. And I think so. I my personal opinion is that I think the sort of, like, they're a cost center. If you're going to think one of two ways, they're a cost center, they're a revenue generator. I think they're a cost center kind of wins in the minds of many executives and stuff over there.
Yeah.
For good or bad. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to pass judgment on whether that's the right way to think about it. I don't think that it is, but I'm not the only. My voice doesn't really matter at all. So it's just a matter of how they think about it. And I don't know. It just seems like, because otherwise, right? Like, I mean, if we're assuming rationality here, right? Otherwise, they would be making these changes. Like how hard would it be to make it so that the EULA shows up as a clickable button?
That's my point, dude.
They have to update web objects. That's going to be too much effort.
Yeah,
that's right? One person's afternoon, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a ticketed linear.
So if you're thinking about it logically, yeah, right. If you're thinking about it logically, then the only conclusion is that they're not doing it not because they can't or because they don't know how or any of that. It's because they don't want to. They don't see that it's important enough to do, because good enough is good enough, right? And and the thing is, they're mostly right, because look at it. I just released a brand new app on the App Store a week ago or whatever, right? Like, I clearly, they're winning in the sense that we're still Apple platform developers.
I think I disagree with the we're still winning sentiment, because when's the last time you went on the App Store to search for an app? Legitimate question.
Where
it's been a hot minute.
Where you're saying not where I've heard about an app and I'm looking it up, but like where I'm just trying to find an app to do X.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll take 7 years as an answer, or more. I think significantly more.
Yeah, so I think the last time this happened legitimately was the family. My family was doing a little bit of research into like an app that could help track like gift wish lists for each other because we got tired of using the Amazon one. And so I think last fall before Christmas, the family kind of, whether it be through the App Store search or just on the web or whatever, we kind of like looked around a little bit to see what was available. And we did find a third party app that we like and that we use. But I don't know that that was even necessarily found just by looking on the App Store. We might have been looking through social media, through I don't remember how we
Mhm.
found it. So it's possible that that doesn't count since we may not have actually just found it by searching.
And was the
I
App Store the first thing that you thought to, oh, let me check the App Store to find this app?
it was in the list, but I don't know if it was first. It may not have
Hmm.
been first. I mean, because part of the problem is like it's not very good. Like when when you search for
Yeah.
stuff, it doesn't it doesn't you don't find what you're looking for usually because it's full of games
Garbage.
and things that are not related. It's like I'm
Casinos
looking
for
up
children.
something. Yeah, casinos for children. Yeah, I mean, even when I was doing some competitive research for Solarc, like trying to see like what other, I was looking basically both at weather applications, which are those are relatively easy to find, at least like the popular ones, because you type in weather and you get Apple weather, and then you get all the other weather dot and weather the where they do like it's called weather, but it has like a weird Unicode character at the end of it so that it can show up at the front. Um, uh, but then, like when I look for things like sunrise and sunset times, things like that, which Solarc also does, that was a much more of a mixed bag. I got some like photography related ones and stuff,
Mm.
and then I also got games that had to do with the sun, which was like, okay, that's not what it's not what I want. That's not and like high on the I mean way up on the search
Hmm.
list. The first within the first 10 results, I'm getting games that have some vague reference to the sun in it, and therefore it's showing up as a and I put in things like sunrise, sunset. I tried to look for keywords that would get me where I wanted to go, and it wasn't even they weren't even
Yeah.
that good. So I think that's part of the problem is right,
Hmm.
like, and I'm sure that's the point you're making, right, is it's difficult to do well because their search feature also kind of isn't that great.
Yeah, and the larger point I'm trying to make is any goodwill that Apple won at the very beginning with the App
Yeah,
Store, I think has slowly waned to the point where they're still writing like
sure,
it as a positive, right? But
sure,
soon it's going to dip into the negative territory and they're
yeah,
not going to be able to rebuild that because
right,
so much of developer sentiment has just gone away. Like we don't
right,
Yeah.
care to help support Apple be a better company because it helps us, right?
right,
No one no one developer is thinking about Apple being successful. Like we're thinking about various individual things. Like we want Swift to be successful. I don't care about
sure,
Apple being successful anymore. Like they are
Yeah.
the most successful company. Like why should I try to help prop that up? You know, like when they
yeah,
were the little guy and when they were actually fighting with quality, it's like, yeah, go get an Apple computer. Like you won't regret it. Why am I? I'm not gonna bother nowadays.
right,
It just doesn't bring any benefit to me to do that, especially when I like suffer through all the little pain points that Apple like makes me go through every day. Whether that's just
right.
the software being broken because they're not focusing on it, or the App Store being stupid. Like there's going to be a tipping point and I don't know when we're going to see it, but once we do see it, I think it's going to be very hard for Apple to like turn the tides.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is going to be forced by government,
Hmm.
and Apple is not going to be able to really reverse the trend there. And it's going to hurt their future products. Like I don't know if anyone is
Hmm.
really going to bother putting tons of development energy into the Vision Pro, for instance,
Hmm.
because like why should you go through that effort if it's not going to necessarily do well and all that, and you don't even believe in it, right?
Right.
Like it's a
Yeah.
vicious cycle that's going to bite them in the end,
Yeah.
and it's not going to end well. But one last thing I wanted to say was so much of what you said reminded me of the delicate interplay between YouTube and their creators,
Hmm.
of how
Yeah.
much YouTube basically
Yeah.
depends entirely on creators and how
Yes.
much they basically don't really care about them. They
Yeah.
care about
No.
advertisers more.
Right. Right.
And in Apple's case, it's not so much like developers and advertisers, but it very much is developers and selling iPhones,
Right.
right? and they just see us as a means to selling iPhones, and they don't realize the value that we brought to the table to sell those iPhones.
Right.
I think that's where their disconnect is, and therefore they see us as something they regrettably need to support because they opened the floodgates. They should have kept them closed, and everything would have been fine. Is probably the way they see it, when they don't realize that the revolution of the iPhone wasn't the fact that it was a portable phone; it was the fact that it was a portable computer that you can do anything on. And that's where their shortcomings are.
That you don't have to rely on the 4 terrible apps that the phone maker puts on the thing, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
if the iPhone 14 had the same exact apps on it that the iPhone 1 did, 15 years later or whatever, I don't think it would be nearly as popular. Even if Apple had gone on and made numbers and, and had added like their other Mac apps to it. Let's say it went from, I don't know how many were on the first phone, but let's say there was 12 apps on the first phone, and now it has maybe 20 apps, right? Even if that were the case, it
Small
still
niche
wouldn't.
thing, just like the
Yeah, it would
Mac
be.
was. Like
Yeah,
that's where it would be
or a
limited.
Trio or something, right? I mean, and like the Palm Pilot, that whole generation of products was revolutionary and industry changing. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a valuable sort of step in our progress of portable computing, but like the Trio, which is kind of the last of the Palm Pilot based devices that even had a phone built into it, was very cool. And it did actually have an ability for you could run like third party apps on it, but it was like awful for. I never developed for it, but I heard stories about how it was just like really, really difficult to get it built and then get it out there and make sure that you could market it. And so
get it to review.
Yeah, like it just wouldn't. It just we wouldn't be nearly where we are today if we lived in a world like that on the iPhone compared to. I mean, I think I have like 150 something apps on my phone right now.
Yeah.
Almost all of them were not built by Apple. They were built by somebody else. And many of them are fantastic. And then some of them are pretty terrible. But I in the neighborhood we live in, I have one for the gate so that I can like let people in or whatever. And it's like, it's not even, I'm pretty sure at some point we've done several changes where the aspect ratio changed and it forced you to have to recompile. And this app is so old that one of those it got caught up in, and so it doesn't even full screen on my iPhone 14. Nice. It's like takes up a smaller space, and it's this like, it was clearly designed by someone who probably has never designed for the iPhone before. It has like a very web. I'm pretty sure it is a native app, but it has a very like web, like mid 2000s web kind of vibe to it on the design. It's like, but even that, like, it works. I can use it, right? And I'd much rather do that than call over there and have to constantly tell people who are visitors are coming or whatever. It is even its terribleness is better than the alternative of either calling or having to email someone or whatever. So yeah, I think we're just the value of that is, I think, immeasurable. Like, Apple can't measure it. I don't think the world can measure it. It's really cool and exciting, but also kind of sad that like that much value was created by this huge community of people, and yet in some ways the most important person we want validation from, Apple, the collection of people, right, is like they're kind of like validating us, but in sort of in a very like superficial way. Like, great job, here's a giant check of hundreds of billions of dollars of your money that you earned, that we're going to claim that we gave you. It's like, no, I earned that money and you took some of it as a tax. That's what's really happening here, right? So it's like exciting, and at DubDub I get super pumped and I'm excited for the keynote, and I always like Vision Pro came out and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. I definitely get sucked into the hype train, but it's also, in calmer moments, it's also kind of a little sad, like a little disappointing that it could be better, right? It could be so much better if they did even a few small things, like the stupid EULA. Like, imagine how many claps they would get for, hey, you don't have to put your EULA or your privacy policy or terms of service in the description anymore that no one will be able to use. Instead, there's places for you to put that so that it's linked and it is whatever.
I guarantee like a 9 to 5 Mac article would be written about that, and we'd all be like, "Yes,
Finally,
thank
yes.
you."
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so on a slightly happier note,
Yes.
do you have any particular features you plan on adding to the next upcoming version of Solarc?
Yeah,
Anything you're excited about?
a real buzzkill conversation, considering that the whole point of this was for me to come on the show and announce my app. But anyway, yeah. So I do have some exciting ideas that I want to work on. So the biggest one for me is to make a widget, because it doesn't currently have one, and I'm actually still using Apple's regular weather app, pretty much just for that one function, just to have a widget on my home screen. So that's the big one that I'm working on to try and get out there. So I want to do home screen widgets. I want to try and do a lock screen widget, and maybe even some Apple Watch complications.
Cool.
I think I can do that without having a watchOS version. I'm not positive on that. I don't know if you guys know that, but I think I can make complications even if I don't have an actual watch app. I also want to make a watch app, because I've never made one in production before, so I think that'd be fun just to learn how that works. Part of the excitement of this was really that it is a fairly simple idea, but it has like these broad, like wide-reaching opportunities to learn about different technologies and stuff. So, but the big one is widgets, and then I think one that would be really exciting is grouping. So that's something that actually an idea that you brought, Dimitri, was essentially grouping locations together, so that if you're tracking a whole bunch of locations, you can group by like friends and family, or whatever. You can sort of slice and dice your locations in different groups. And I think would be fun is maybe even to like not just group, but also maybe even provide like summary data or something. I don't know. I haven't
As a
figured that out
widget.
yet, but yeah, as a widget, right? So yeah, so there's all that. That's all coming, and then I'm excited to now that I didn't put the beta on my phone because I was trying to be a good developer, and not do that on my carry phone. And also because I was trying to get Solarc 1.0 out for iOS 16, so I really wanted to have a physical device to test on for that. But now that it's out, and now that we're also only like a month and like 45 days away or so ish from iOS 17 potentially coming out, I'd like to also start really heavily playing with 17 and seeing how Solarc does. I did run it in the simulator on beta 1, and it crashed immediately. So that's great. And in fact, I actually submitted a feedback to Apple about the weather. So it's called the weather service, which is it's through WeatherKit. It's how you get weather data. I'm getting console. I don't know if I'd call them errors, but I'm getting console messages very frequently about it not supposedly finding data for the location I've given it, even though I get a full data set back from the API call. So I think maybe it's just a false report, the error or the message.
Have you tried Xcode 15 with its new console like filtering and stuff like that?
I did briefly when I ran Solarc on the first beta, but since it crashed almost immediately, I was like, well, I'm not really getting very far with this. So, but anyway,
Fair.
I want to kind of jump into, load it up in 15, get it running on my device on iOS 17, see what's working, what's not working, get all that resolved, so that I can have a build out for 17 that's capable of handling 17.
So it's kind of only at Xcode 15, but iOS got to 17.
Yeah, that is weird.
I don't know, and we're on like watchOS 9, and it's a mess, dude.
Yeah. And in theory, they're all like the same, right? They're just all different flavors of the same thing. And then we're at what is the new version of macOS that's coming out in the fall?
I have no clue. 15? 14?
Is it? I think it might
14.
be
14.
Because ever since
15?
we got off of OS 10, now it's like,
14.
well, I don't remember which number it is now. So
we're on 13 right now.
What is it?
So Sonoma is 14.
Yeah. Right.
So we have 14, 15, 9, visionOS 1, tvOS I think is 16.
Well, 17. I think tvOS keeps parity with iOS, so
yeah,
it'll be iOS 17 and tvOS.
It'll be 17,
and it's actually Watch
M3.
Isn't it WatchOS 10? Or am I getting ahead of myself? Is it watchOS 9? I don't
I
I
even
think
don't
we're
know.
on
know.
9 right now.
I should know this
Okay.
But
better
yes, I
because
think
I
it will
write
be
so
10.
many add available statements in my like open source projects. I have like all of them, but like I know the one where like source concurrency got added, and I know none of the
Yeah.
other ones.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, we're on watchOS 9 currently, so it will be 10.
Okay. Yeah, so I think widgets and grouping are probably my big things. And then if I can, I want to switch to the 17 paywall.
Cool.
If for another reason than just to see what that's all about. Like it looks amazing.
Yeah, it looks good.
So yeah.
Nice.
Exciting stuff, and I probably have another, I don't know, 8 or 10 tickets in my backlog of other things that I could do. Like I think it was you, Dimitri, that suggested that. So like the way the arc works, it shows you the sun traversing through the sky, and you can see it for all the different locations. So you had a couple different ideas around how I could sort of change that so that, let's say, for example, it lines up with a particular time zone,
Mm-hmm.
and then it shows you kind of like where everybody is in relation to that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Because I did have ideas around that in the beginning. That was actually part of the initial idea, was to sort of focus around you, where you are versus where the other person is, and what the differences are. So,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some stuff that's still in there. Like, for example, it tells you for every location, it assumes you are the central point around which everything else orbits. So like all the other locations that you put in here that aren't yours, it tells you the offset of how many hours off that person is from you, whether it's yesterday, today, or tomorrow for them compared to you, things like that. And I do have, I even have data in there about, like, tells you how. I had some ideas basically about how to sort of compare them to you and what's different between them. And so I would like to maybe continue to highlight some of those ideas as well, because it doesn't seem to really do that in other. I've noticed in other apps, like a lot of times there'll be sunrise and sunset times, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm actually using a mathematical calculation to determine sunrise and sunset time, so it's not dependent on a network call. You put in the latitude, longitude, and it gives you back the times. So I do want to switch over to WeatherKit. Actually includes all those times as part of its data payload. I want to probably switch to those because, for one, you get a lot more values. So there's not just sunrise and sunset. There's also different sort of amounts of light are
Dawn.
visible. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
dawn and like nautical dawn and then like astronomical dawn, and like it's anyway.
Dang.
So like to get into some more of those and give you even more kind of granularity around what's going on. But I also want to sort of understand what people want to, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's kind of fun about this transition from just being like my idea and my sort of input into what the features are. Then there was the beta period where lots of people gave me ideas, but now that it's in the App Store, hopefully, as the user base grows, I'd like to hear from them too about what they want. And I think it's a sort of fun new perspective on it, because it's really just been mostly what I think is reasonable. But I think it's going to be exciting to hear from users about what they might want, because there's probably going to be lots of things that I would never think to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they present it to me, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. So I'm excited to kind of hear what people think of it and what they'd like to see.
Awesome, exciting times.
Yeah. The system works.
In terms of other announcements, CodableDatastore has reached 0.1, which is not a 1.0. It's the inverse of that.
So
and
I should immediately integrate it into Solarc and ship it in production.
please
Exactly.
do. Expect data loss if you do that, because I already have like things I need to change about the underlying data format. So don't do what Ben just suggested. But do start thinking about it for long term. Like I need to finish it at this point, right? So it's not going to be left unfinished. I promise, pinky swear. But it's still something that's a few months at least off of like where it needs to be for you to like ship it. But it's like feature complete, and I'm like really excited about that. So if you want to hear more about that, go listen to last week's Commented Out. I think I went into a huge amount of detail there. Just wanted to let everyone know that since we recorded that, I did finish it, and then we posted the episode. And yeah, it's a proper 0.1 now.
So comparatively speaking, what have you done so far to kind of, what have you found that works for you to kind of keep yourself motivated to work on it and keep things moving forward?
That's an excellent question. So instead of having a well planned out linear with story points and all that, I have a to do list in the README that I've been half
Sure.
maintaining, half not. I think I
Sure.
realized during our recording last week, it's like, oh, I got that one done already, and I didn't even delete
Yeah.
it. So that's my to do list.
Okay. Sure.
It is supplanted by having issues in GitHub that I have not looked at, and therefore someone actually used CodableDatastore or something, and they're like, "Hey, it doesn't load data back from when you're like restart an app," and I just did not see that for 3 days. But they submitted a PR after 3 days, so I'm like,
nice.
I saw the PR, so that all worked.
Cool.
Okay. But mostly I've just been posting on Mastodon like daily or semi-daily updates of like, hey, this is what I got done so far, and this is what I'm planning on doing next. And that is the tiny bit of accountability that like, I really need to like post an update, or I need to make some small amount of progress there. So that's cool. What's been doing it for me.
Nice. I mean, whatever works, right?
Yeah, I have not started on the app that I originally wanted to write that needed this. I reserved the name in App Store Connect yesterday, so I guess progress.
There's progress. Yeah, there's progress.
I did take a 3 months hiatus to like figure out how I want to store data, as one does.
Sure.
Just like gotta write a database from scratch first, and then you can draw the rest of the owl.
Of course.
And yeah, I'm hoping that I can stay motivated to actually finish an app now. That's always the goal, but we'll see where that takes me. I don't want to make any promises yet.
And my guess is that working with CodableDatastore in an app that you're building will probably be very helpful to find all kinds of things that you're like, oh, this is poorly designed, or I should change it to this, or whatever. You know, once you start to use it, you're really going to probably make, I would guess, a lot of progress on it, because it'll make things much clearer than when you're kind of thinking about it in the abstract of, well, how would anyone use this to do anything? That's a useful question to ask, but certainly, you know, using it for yourself, right, in a real application, I'm sure will be very helpful to move that ball forward.
And that was the prime motivation behind calling this a 0.1. It's this is the point where I can actually start using it. Up until now, it's like, well, you can save records, you can't load them yet, or you can't like do basic operations that are just like, oh, hey, you can use it, and then when you restart, nothing is there. It's like, oh, great. That's not
if you can't
really
CRUD with a database, then you're not
you're not databasing.
You're not databasing.
So that was like my prime motivation. The other prime motivation was updating my Chonky Boy setup. If you are new to the show, this is my NAS, which is just a bunch of hard drives that are making a ton of noise in this corner. And I wanted to update that to SSDs now that SSDs have dropped a fair amount in price. So I have a pack of SSDs that I need to set up eventually. But I was telling myself, hey, I need to finish this first before I can do that project. So me wanting to mess around and waste a lot of time with computers is what's causing me to waste a lot of time with computer code. And it's all a gratuitous cycle, right? This is why I don't play games where you have to like manage and do work, because my life is already a game where I manage and do work. So I don't need more of that. But yeah, I feel like I found a happy medium that's working so far. And we'll see when I burn out that if it's not working anymore.
Well, I mean, whatever. I think that's the key, right? It's not necessarily to do any one thing that any of us recommend. It's just to find the formula that works for you that can actually move the ball forward. That's all I got to do.
Yeah. In other news, it seems like Apple is getting the motivation to move forward with a new internal Ajax framework to build the next generation of LLMs. I guess for Siri. It would be the prime use case. I'm going to be interested in to know if they're going to like keep with their morals and build something completely in house without stealing every person's copyright information and then like claiming, oh, it was public use, so we can't reveal our sources.
Uh-huh.
Like it seems like Apple is doing an
Reddit.
excellent job
Yeah.
on all of that. I mean, not just Reddit, but OpenAI. Like all, there's a whole bunch of lawsuits
Oh,
now. I don't know
sure.
if you've been keeping up
I
with
mean,
it. It's a
I
big
think
mess.
Bard, I think all of them basically did the same thing, right? They just
Mhm.
Yeah.
they trained on open data. And then what also I thought was funny is that now it's starting to bite them in the ass because they're now ingesting training data that
Mhm.
was itself
And it
generated
makes it
by,
worse.
Yeah.
It
and it
brings
makes it
down
worse.
the average
Yeah.
significantly.
There's there I immediately thought of I forget which episode it is, but there's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where they're dealing with a problem where cloning, and the doctor explains she has this whole techno jargon, this techno babble thing where she talks about replicative fading, where basically every time you have a new generation of clones, you end up with like worse quality until eventually like
Mm.
they have trouble staying
Yeah,
alive
you hit
because
an equilibrium that is not what you needed
right.
at the
And
end
I
of the
feel
day.
like this is just basically the LLMs just eating their own tail of crappy quality data
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
making themselves worse, which I mean, I think there's a lot of promise with it, but also I feel like sort of to the point that you made earlier about like them essentially just stealing a whole bunch of copywritten data and building a business off the backs of other people's work for free. I kind of feel like that I definitely took a little a little joy out of hearing things like, oh, it's kind of ruining it because they're eating their own dog food in a bad way,
Haha,
where it's
take
like,
that.
Right.
yeah, take that. Yeah. So yeah.
So I'm not dismissing LLMs completely. Like they have fantastical uses and
Sure.
they have been a joy to play around with. Right? We never
Yeah,
had
they're
anything
fun.
close to this up until
Right.
now. It's just unfortunate that the decisions to use like any and everything
Right.
that you can look at, which
Right.
is like it belongs to other people, and
Mm-hmm.
then you say no, it belongs to me. Like that is
Yeah.
not the right way around it.
Right.
And like making claims that, oh no, we cannot show our references because it would prove that we stole copyright. Like saying
Right.
that just kind of like ruins it a little bit.
Right.
So we'll see how this
Did
like
you
works about.
did you see the examples where they were I think it might have been Midjourney that was creating images and like a warped version of like Getty Images or
Oh
one of
yeah,
the
Yes.
we talked
watermarks
about
Yeah.
shows
that.
up in the
So bad, dude.
but it does have good uses. In fact, I wrote uh, ChatGPT wrote Solarc's App Store description. I gave it a prompt
Oh,
and asked it to
nice.
make the description for me because I'm not good
I mean,
at
to be
like
fair, you stole
long.
someone else's privacy policy, so why not do the
I
description?
mean, right? Exactly. I'm not going to get any downloads from this. But,
The app is
anyway,
authentic. We swear.
it is. It's all my work. So I asked it to write a description and I gave it a prompt, right? And it gave me this very nice, I feel like very fitting description, as far as like the voice and what I've seen people write and stuff. It made up features that the app doesn't have.
Yeah.
So it did hallucinate or lie or whatever you want to call about that because it doesn't obviously know, right? But the cool thing is I was able to take the block of text, I was able to bring it into my own editor, delete all the stuff that's untrue,
Exactly.
and then change some of the language so that it just fits better with what I wanted to actually say. But essentially it gave me like a jumping off point. And I found that to be really valuable. And I think that might be where it is the most valuable in
Mhm.
that it is a jumping off point in various ways for various people in various industries. But this idea that, I mean, I think already some idiot lawyer has tried to
Yes.
submit briefs to the court arguing a case, and
That
there
didn't
were other
exist.
cases cited in the brief that were non-existent. It's like,
Yep.
duh, like it doesn't, people are like, oh, it's lying. It's like, no, it's not lying. It just has no concept of what truth is. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not sentient or any of that other nonsense people have been saying. It's just essentially a fancy word generator.
It's a good first pass. Like I
But
think
yeah,
what you did is like a perfectly like
Mhm.
ethical way of doing it where you're like, okay, let's have it generate this. Maybe I'm not the best at writing app store descriptions to make
sure,
them punchy or whatever.
sure,
And then you go through and you're like, well, this isn't true, this isn't true, this could be edited, and then
yeah,
it's a draft, right? And then you
right,
you kind of polish the rough draft into something that is actually usable.
Right.
Where,
Mhm.
yeah, that lawyer that just like copy pasted, it's like
I'm still going
high
to charge
school students.
$500 an hour, but now I'm going to have ChatGPT do my work for me.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
genius if you can get it working.
Well,
right?
yeah.
And then
Sure,
the Ponzi
yeah,
scheme
yeah.
catches up with you. But that
True.
brings up an excellent point. Like, we as humans, we are capable of doing that, right? We look at existing works and
Yeah.
then we modify them appropriately and take what we need and create a new copyrighted work at the end of the day,
Sure.
right? That's what we are capable of. And this is just another tool in that toolbox.
Right.
However, it is kind of irresponsible of a company to say, like, no, we're not going to show you the references because then it would prove
Right.
that we're using copyrighted work.
Right.
Part of this, I don't think, is that. I think that these tools should be allowed to exist even though they make use of copyrighted work, because it's no different than us, like, referencing something. As long as it is not presented as like, here, this is my creation. I the human, did nothing after that point. But if you use that as a starting point and then like use it to trace and then do something new for like the artwork case or for the text case, heavily edit and modify it to like the parameters that you require, I think that's totally reasonable and fine. And it's down to the tools that are making like these LLMs accessible. It's down to them to like put the work in to make sure that it's giving real data that's not something that is like fabricated and hallucinated, right? Something that Tome that I found quite impressive that they are doing is we are focusing on making sure that if you do generate anything, that you can pull real references like that exist on the internet through Google, right? And we use the LLM to like facilitate the process to get those references, but the references are real and they do pertain to what you like need a reference for, and they won't exist. Like if you try to say like, hey, climate change was caused by plants and not humans, it's going to say like, oh, here's a reference that actually says, well, it's actually caused by humans, not the methane released by forests. That's not what climate change is being caused by.
Right.
So I think that it's very important that tools like have that as a capability. Otherwise, like, what's the point? We're just facilitating copyright theft. We need to facilitate creativity and moving humans forward rather than the alternative. So that's I think one of the missing pieces from this current generation of AI, where we kind of just took references and don't preserve the references through. I think the next generation is going to need to do that because it's not viable. And two, it's going to be able to tell when it itself used fake data to train itself, if that makes sense. So I think that is going to be pertinent.
Yeah, very fair.
Also, it was funny when they said Ajax. The immediate first thing I thought of was XML HTTP request, which I don't know if any of you had the pleasure of using in the early days of the web, but that was how you built a Web 2.0 website that did not reload to fetch data. You constructed an XML HTTP request because, of course, you needed XML. You did not need JSON. JSON was this weird thing that you could just like write some JavaScript and then call eval on, and you got an object. And I was like, what? And then people just started putting JavaScript in these XML requests that definitely had XML in them. And that's how JSON was kind of born. So I find it funny that they're using that term, and it probably ages me to speak about like where it comes from. It's this asynchronous JavaScript something. So yeah, I found that funny. One more update on Apple's front from Mark Gurman. It seems like Apple stores are considering to allow customers pay directly in store and then have something shipped to them, which like I don't know why we didn't have up until now. It's like you go to an Apple store and it's like, oh, we don't have that. It's like, can you make it have that and then just like have it go home? And I'll pay for it now. I have long wanted something like that because otherwise you just feel like the trip was wasted. And
I guess they do.
They're considering it.
They used to. What you could do is you could just like go on your phone or go on a computer at their store and order it from the Apple Store online. But then you can just do that at home, right? You're not really getting anything out of that.
Exactly.
So, Yeah, that's
and
smart.
and it's
And also
especially
weird
useful
that they didn't have it.
for business
Yeah,
lines as well, because
sure.
Oh,
like
sure.
sometimes those portals don't have everything,
Right.
so you can make the transaction and just have it go. And I think they
Hmm.
need this for the Vision Pro most of all, right? Come in, get fitted, and not necessarily leave with one if they don't have one, but
Right.
at the very least you did all the steps and then you can see it in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
Yeah, I'm really curious if that's going to be the only way you'll be able to get one, is if you have to go in for a fitting, or if you'll be able to do online ordering. I kind of feel like it's so custom to your
Hmm.
face that like you're probably going to have to go into the store to get fitted, because otherwise they're going to end up with a ton of returns. Like, oh, I bought the wrong, I bought
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
wrong face shield size or the wrong strap size or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be the case where that I think there was an article a few weeks ago where it's like that's going to be like a requirement to buy it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you can just straight up buy it online. Like you
Mm,
have to go in and get fitted so it's a good experience for your
right. Yeah.
$3,500.
Hmm. Yeah, because this is like one of the first products Apple's selling that is not necessarily just a hunking amount of processing power, right?
Uh-huh.
That you already know what you want, so you're getting it, and you realize that you're spending a lot of money, so you don't need that whole amount of validation. Where this is like a new product, everyone's kind of iffy. I saw a ton of people in the community be like, "Well, I'm probably gonna wait for the cheaper one," and
Yeah.
that is like a strong indicator that Apple probably needs to do something like this for them, right? So that way they can feel comfortable, much like the Apple Watch was originally, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Yeah. They even had them open in boutiques, which was very weird.
Yeah.
Talking about one last thing that's kind of weird, but also very cool. You can apparently use an iPad as an external display starting in iOS 17 or iPad OS 17, because
Yeah.
you can use a capture card, and that capture card will be seen as a camera in FaceTime, for
That's
instance.
very
So
cool.
if you use a little capture card, you can go
Oh,
ahead and plug in your Switch to your iPad and have a large-ish portable screen. I was
interesting.
just thinking about this before I saw this article. Like, hey, if I ever need to like work with the Mac Minis I have in my office, I don't have like extra displays to like lug around. It would be so cool if I could just plug in an iPad and have that like detect as a display, and a
Hmm.
keyboard and a mouse, like the KVM of
Yeah,
Yeah.
portability kind of thing.
sure.
And this is not quite that, but it is like this in that direction, which I'm
Hmm.
kind of excited to see. So maybe one day someone will make a little dongle that you can plug into, like a Thunderbolt thing
Right,
you can plug into any computer, and then the
right,
output is another Thunderbolt thing to an iPad, and they have
right.
an app that just like transmits everything. That would be perfect, honestly. So maybe
Because it
one
is
day.
funny that people lug around their like $1,000 iPad, and then they also frequently will buy one of those like foldable, like portable USB powered displays
Yeah.
Hmm.
at the same time, and it's like, but I already have $1,000 screen in my in my briefcase as it is. Like, why can't I
Hmm.
just use that? So yeah, that's definitely cool.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, with this adventure of me buying like 3 Mac Minis from Orchard a couple weeks ago, like it is kind of a pain to plug them in and everything, and I was messing around with my Luna displays to connect them that way, and it was okay, but you still have to connect it to another display and
You have to
install Luna
install
display,
software.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's kind of a whole back and forth. So
Yeah.
because I do have one iPad on iPad OS 17, and I have an Elgato capture card. I'm
Hmm.
going to try this out and maybe report back next week and see if it
Nice.
works. It's on an Apple Insider article, and they have just this like USB-C to HDMI dongle, and maybe the Elgato is a little bit overkill, but
Mm.
yeah, I'll mess around. And the dongle is like $18 or something. So if this doesn't work, I might try theirs. And yeah, it's
Cool.
a fun idea, and yeah, especially for something like a Mac Mini where it's like it's headless, there is no display connected. Whereas like with a
Right.
Switch, it's like unless you have like the 12.9 inch iPad Pro, I'm not really sure you're getting that much of a benefit.
Yeah. It's a little
Um,
silly for that scenario, but for Mac Minis, like Apple just
that's
built this in.
perfect.
Please have a mode where you can just like turn it into monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and then just plug it into anything. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So I'll try it out and report back. That's a fun idea.
Awesome. This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Not Pho. Tired of eating the same old meals time and time again? Consider Vietnamese food. You might already know of pho, but there are a ton of other flavors specific to Vietnamese cuisine that are sadly not well known around the world. This includes everything from sandwiches like banh mi, rice plates like com tam, and even the deliciously savory crepes known as banh xeo. That's where the app Not Pho comes in. It's a free-to-try app dedicated to teaching you all about the wonders behind Vietnamese cuisine, brought to life with colorful and interactive illustrations and animations. Learn how to make many classic Vietnamese flavors at home, but even if you don't cook, you'll know how to order like a pro the next time you visit your local Vietnamese restaurant. Recently new is version 1.2, which brought a brand new home screen to the app featuring a recipe of the week and a map of Vietnam, allowing you to start exploring recipes by region as well. Thanks again to Not Pho for sponsoring our show. Search for Not Pho, that's N-O-T space P-H-O, on the App Store today to give it a try completely for free. So Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you. And that is that you can use unowned, on properties as well as closures. This is something that I never really thought too much about up until I needed to make complex interactions with actors. And you might be wondering, well, why did actors like force your hand to like learn about this new thing? Well, if you use a weak var with an actor, that weak var is isolated to the actor, meaning that if it like the reference gets stale, it gets changed to nil because it's a variable, and you have to await any access to a variable because it's an actor. However, with unowned, you can keep it a let, which means that you can mark any properties that access it non-isolated, which means that you don't need to use await. So you can use forget what it's called, suspending code throughout a big chain of multiple actors working together, which I use a ton in CodableDatastore, and unowned lets you do that. So
nice.
Cool.
If you know the lifetime is not going to end early, use unknown. It is much faster. Right. It's a constant, and you can use them in actors. That's basically it.
Nice, very cool.
And I also have a mini review corner for this week. It's not too technological, but it is marginally technological. It's this blanket from Throwboy, and I probably can't talk with this in front of the mic, but it's in the style of classic System 7, and I can open it up a little bit more. You just got your
very cool
system hard drive.
Yes,
it's like pixel accurate, but it seems like they stretched it, I think, because some like pixel lines are too wide. Like on some of the file icons, it's a little weird. So that like one caveat aside, I think they needed to do it to make the blanket big enough because the resolution was so small. So like there's probably good reasons why they did it, but it's a very, very nice blanket. Very like thick and comfortable. The cat already loves it. She's been all over it, and I'm a little afraid because her nails are like pulling out the fibers. So I'm like, oh, get off my nice blanket. But yeah, that's what I have this week. So if you are also interested in a quilted, pretty expensive but very well made blanket from Throwboy, go check them out.
Nice.
And finally, we have our completion curiosities for this week, and I'm finally getting to the end of the backlog here, so maybe next week we'll just have like one, but we still have two. The first is a Blender camera follow-up, and I think, Spencer, you shared this. You can now take pictures in Blender with this person's camera. All the resources are there. It takes forever to render, but he improved it. He spent most of the video saying he was about to publish it, and then let me just fix this, do this thing, like the typical software process, to be honest. So definitely go check that out. And then the other one is completely hilarious. It's called The Free Movie. It's the B movie, but crowdsourced to be redrawn in like crappy drawings.
Paint.
Yeah. And it is absolutely wonderful. that this exists, because you can watch the whole movie frame by frame, drawn by random people on the internet. For the most part, it is well done. Every now and then there's like a penis, but that's the nature of having the internet
that's what you
do
get.
things. So yeah, A+ there.
Yeah, it made by 29,800, or sorry, 29,088 people.
Wow.
Worked together to do it. That's pretty nuts. It's like a fever dream, but it's pretty fun.
And apparently the next one they're doing is John Wick 4.
Yeah.
It's a little ambitious, but I think it'll come out awesome. As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at code completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis. And Ben, who is at Ferris Guy. That's FERROUSGUY, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.